Today, as you know, we launch Sinn Féin's plan to make childcare affordable, to deliver childcare at €10 a day. For far too long, the cost of childcare has placed an extraordinary burden on parents, particularly during the cost of living crisis. And well, I know it. I remember being that parent, juggling work, 2 small children, trying to find suitable childcare arrangements. And so I understand the crucial role that childcare professionals play in shaping the future of our children, how important it is to have affordable, accessible, reliable childcare or childminding arrangements. And my own kids are young adults now, but I know from parents that I have met and listened to right across the country that very little has improved. If anything, in some areas, matters have gotten worse. Childcare costs are often described as the equivalent of a second mortgage, with some parents paying hundreds or even thousands of euros every month. According to the 2022 annual Early Years Sector Profile report by Pubble, monthly full-time childcare fees averaged almost €800 per child. So this places a huge pressure on families. It's not fair and it's not sustainable. Meaningful change is needed. Working parents deserve affordable childcare. So our ambitious plan would ensure that all parents have access to childcare at €10 a day per child. This is achievable. It's something that's available to parents in other countries. What's absent in Ireland, despite the sound bites and vague promises, is a government with the political will to make this happen. We're bringing forward this plan because we recognise that affordable childcare is not only essential for the well-being of families, it is also essential to the functioning of our economy. It's clear to everyone, especially those parents footing the big bills, that the model of childcare provision employed by the state currently simply isn't working. We see this not only in the high costs, but of course in the lack of spaces available in the system, with thousands of children on waiting lists. This often means that parents must rely on family and friends to look after their children. It forces many parents to reduce their working hours or to give up work altogether, placing additional financial strain on the household. High childcare costs also create barriers, in particular to women's participation in the labour market and to reducing child poverty. It's clear that a radical overhaul is needed in how childcare services in this state are delivered. Delivering affordable childcare at €10 per day makes sense. It's central to the happiness of families, to driving productivity in our economy and unlocking the potential of our society. As well as guaranteeing affordable childcare, our plan ensures that families will have the childcare system they deserve. We will achieve this by investing ambitiously to build capacity, to increase childcare places, to increase pay for childcare workers and early years educators. That is critical. To make childminders eligible for our €10 a day scheme and extend benefits for parents to care for their babies in the first year of their life. Investing to build a modern, responsive, fit-for-purpose childcare system is one of the smartest investments any government could ever make. Providing affordable childcare at €10 a day would represent major positive change for families, ensuring that children have the best start in life and taking pressure off their parents. This plan is part of our commitment to make Ireland a better place to raise a family and build a future. This is the childcare plan that we would, given the chance, implement in government. And I'm now delighted to hand you over to our spokesperson on children, Claire Curran, who will take you through our plan in greater detail. Claire.
Thank you. And I was wondering today, actually, because lots of people were saying how good my PowerPoint looks, and I didn't realise that someone jazzed it up really good. So when people were saying how great it was, and I was thinking, God, I'm how great I did this last night, and obviously someone's made it 100 times better, so that's nice. Thank you for whoever did that. Yes, you're all very welcome and good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Many of you will know, and as has been said, despite increased investment, and we are now in a situation where over €1 billion goes into the childcare sector for funding and for subsidies, yet at the same time parents right across the state in some cases are paying up to €1,600 a month for childcare. So there's something very wrong when you're putting in that level of investment and yet parents are still really struggling to afford it in the first instance and actually to access it then in some cases in some parts of the country as well. So we're outlining today our plan. It has 3 key priorities around affordability, which is obviously a major issue, accessibility and building capacity. It's great if you can afford childcare, but you have to be able to access it in the first instance. So we have a number of proposals that we're making in relation to accessing childcare. And then flexibility for parents in the first year. And all research shows that babies do well when they are with at least one parent for the first year of their life. So we want to make this reality. It's something that's been talked about in Ireland for very many years, and it's something that we want to make sure and that we are committed to introduce in government. So firstly, just to bring you through those 3 key priorities, affordability is absolutely key. It's a great shame to think that any parent will be in a position where they can't afford childcare. It has huge consequences for the parent, for their child, for the child's development, for their preparation going in to primary and that more formal level of education, for the child's development, mental health, well-being, and then for the parent in accessing employment, being part of the economy and paying their taxes, which in turn obviously impacts on our economy. So the plan quite clearly is €10 a day per child for childcare and no more, and essentially capping it at that €10 as many countries do. How we would do this is we would use what's already there in relation to the National Childcare Scheme. There is a subsidy there, and we would look at increasing that subsidy to meet the gap between current fees as they are and getting it to €10. So that will obviously vary, but it is costed, and that is what we are committing to do in terms of affordability. It's important to say as well, I have met with business organisations who've said to me that their employees, in some ways, no matter how much they earn, affordability is an issue. But on top of that, and almost just as importantly, is accessing childcare places in the first place. So there are major issues and deficiencies when it comes to places. We have thousands of children around the state that are on waiting lists for places that simply do not exist and will not exist. And we need to look at building capacity, and we have put together a plan that looks at how we can build capacity and do so immediately, because it needs to be done and done quickly. One issue that always comes up is in relation to early years educators themselves, recruiting them, and then key after that is actually retaining them. And many of you will have heard there are lots of instances where you have early years educators who have done a 4-year degree who are moving into primary school roles and are particularly moving in to take up roles as SNAs. So we have a serious issue when it comes to retaining these staff, and if we do not pay them and pay them adequately, then we will have no childcare sector if we do not have the workers in the first instance. So SIP2 have looked for a 150 increase per hour. We are committing to that. That will bring early years educators and all grades within the sector, including managers, that €1.50, and that is an initial pay increase, but it will mean the minimum rate that's currently €13.65 will be €15.15. And that's very much to our early years educators, who are our greatest asset in relation to the childcare sector. We have an ongoing issue with childminders in that where parents, and particularly in rural areas, many parents would choose childminders or would like to choose childminders, but they cannot access the subsidy. So in some cases, and research has shown, this is pushing parents to choose more formal childcare arrangements that in some cases aren't as flexible. It's not really the choice they want to make, but they need the subsidy, they need the assistance financially, so they're almost forced into doing it. There is a plan there to bring childminders in. We want to do that and do that quickly, and our plan allows for cost and otherwise that we will ensure the €10 a day childcare is there for people that choose childminders, and that's really, really important. In relation to core funding, we need an urgent review of core funding, and we are committed to that. We have a situation where some childcare providers are receiving €8,000, others are receiving €600,000. And while the data and list is available of who's getting how much, we are not aware of the gap between those that are maybe struggling, those that aren't struggling. We're not going to get that data. It's not going to be published. It is being shared with the government at the moment because they're looking at potential fee increases. So we want to see, and we will undertake an immediate review of core funding. It's really important that we know where the money is going and how we need to tweak that to make sure it really works. And then in relation to the social enterprise model, this is a really interesting model. It's one that is actually in place, Brí agus Sport in Carndonagh, in Pearse's constituency, where they have a hub and it has lots of different facilities, organisations, different music and different lessons for children. So it's an after school, it's co-working hubs, it's all under one roof. We have so many underused and vacant buildings in our state. At the moment in my own constituency, Boyle and County Roscommon are looking for a childcare place. There are lots of vacant buildings and we're trying to work with the council to get somewhere. So rather than going through planning permission, building and costs, let's make use of the vacant and unused buildings that are right across our state. And particularly perhaps in rural areas where it's not viable for someone to go in and set up. There's lots of community centres and lots of buildings we can use, and that is the community use where you share costs, share insurance, share rent and all of that. So that is something that we are committed to incorporate. And then our third pillar then is in relation to flexibility for parents, and again this is something that's been talked about in Ireland for a very long time. We, as you will know, have 26 weeks of maternity leave. In the case of a two-parent family, you have your 9 and 9 weeks in parents' leave and benefit. For one-parent families, they just get the 9 weeks, or they will get under parents' leave, so the child misses out. So under our plan, we are getting everyone to the 52 weeks. That means an additional 9 for one-parent families to make up what they're already missing, which in my view is discrimination, and added to that the 8 weeks which others will get, and that will make sure that a parent, where they wish, can remain with the child for the first 52 weeks if that's something that they want to do. The cost of our plan then, so just lastly to go through the costs, the delivery of the €10 per day childcare for parents, 345 million. And again, that cost might surprise you, but when you actually think we're already putting over 1 billion in already, and parents are paying over £1,000 a month for childcare, to think that you can put in 345 to guarantee that €10 a day, that is transformative for parents and for their children and for their child's development as well. And again, this includes childminders, which we want to bring into the scheme. The initial pay increase, which is really important for early years educators, £150 an hour. That is at a cost of 53.8 million. We'll put that into core funding and it'll be ring fenced to make sure that that is passed on. The extension of parents' leave and benefit is 106 million. And then we are putting together a contingency fund, it's 208 million. And that is for any changes. So after the review of core funding, for example, if we need additional money, it will be there. And I think it's wise to have that contingency fund in place for a sector like childcare where things can change. So we will have that fund in place. That's the proposal. There are 3 key priorities. They're the costs. And we are very mindful in that we are in a cost of living crisis that we've been in for some time. Parents are paying far too much for childcare. Some of them are really struggling. It's the child at the end of the day that suffers. So we are confident this is our plan. It is fully costed and it is deliverable for €10 a day childcare for everyone. Thank you.
Yes. Good morning. Thanks, Mary and Claire. And as has been mentioned across Ireland, childcare is a key issue for families right across the state. And the coalition government has been long on platitudes, but short on firm details here. The policy proposal that we're putting forward is an important step towards tackling an issue that requires systemic and long-term investment by government. And this needs to be in the terms of tackling the cost for families, ensuring a supply of quality childcare places, and enhancing the wages and the working conditions of the key workers who provide these services every day for children right across the state. The €10 a day provision involves an annual total budgetary commitment of €345 million, of part of an overall additional investment of €609 million in the childcare sector. Fee controls will apply for providers who avail of these supports to run their practices comfortably. We want to ensure that the taxpayer gets value for money for the investment that we would make. And unfortunately, we all live in a world, in Ireland, where thousands of children are waiting on childcare spaces. So So it's critical that the capacity of the sector is expanded. Sinn Féin wouldn't just reduce the cost of childcare, we will also work to increase the capacity within the sector so that parents can not only afford for childcare but also they can actually access childcare. The challenge for workers in childcare who take care of our children every day need to be recognised, as does the recruitment and the retention crisis that is in this sector. This is one of the main reasons that we have the lack of capacity, and this is largely due to the fact that there is low wages within this sector. Wages in the sector are not reflective of the vital role that early year educators have in our society, the role that they play, and indeed the role that they play in our economy. Hourly rates are close to the minimum wage and with little recognition for obtaining advanced qualifications. So Sinn Féin, as Claire outlined, will provide funding of €53.8 million for an increased hourly wage of childcare workers of $150 initially. That's the first year increase. This funding would be ring-fenced for wages. Our 5-year expenditure plan also makes further provision to fund the outcome of sectoral negotiations on pay increases over the subsequent years of our term if we are in government. In government, Sinn Féin would initiate a review into the current pathways into early years to ensure those with a passion for early years and who work well with children are not locked out of the sector due to barriers to education. And we believe that there's also potential to increase the capacity of the childcare sector by extending subsidies, as Claire mentioned, to childminders. The ESRI have made it very clear in their conclusions that the main effect of the current subsidy structure has been a shift of demand from childminders and other informal childcare providers of demand to providers of creche. So the formal childcare providers are now under more pressure. And this is despite a preference from many parents in Ireland for informal childcare. Therefore, Sinn Féin proposed to make childminders eligible for the delivery of the €10 a day childcare scheme. We would work with stakeholders in the sector, including the regulator, TUSLA, to ensure that this process is accelerated and the right balance between practicality and health and safety of children is struck. Finally, in government, Sinn Féin would immediately undertake a review of core funding based on the data available to the Department of Children that is collected through the core funding financial reporting Hive service, which profiles and core funding the applications which profiles the core funding of this sector. This funding was supposed to increase the capacity of the childcare provision. Current information suggests that capacity constraints are still a key problem. So our review would examine the adequacy of the distribution of core funding, and our 5-year expenditure plan makes financial provision for an increase to core funding following this review. On childcare, Fine Gael have a soundbite, Sinn Féin has a plan. The babies that were born in 2011 when Fine Gael came into power are now teenagers. If they haven't delivered on childcare after 13 years, they're not going to do it in the next 5. The difference between us and them is we have a clear costed plan ready to deliver €10 a day childcare for all parents beginning next year. This plan clearly shows that Sinn Féin has the solutions, has the plan to deliver affordable childcare for all Irish families. We now know that this can be done, and a Sinn Féin government will demonstrate the political resolve to address the childcare crisis for once and for all.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So,
Okay.
Keshta.
IMEC are saying today that they're concerned about, I suppose, the consultation with childcare providers. Is that something that's been undertaken here, and are they on board that they can ramp up and increase capacity on this front?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I've obviously just taken up the role. This is a new role for me, and I have engaged widely. I have engaged with providers that are signed into core funding and providers that aren't. I've obviously engaged with SIP2, I've engaged with early years educators directly myself in various settings. So very much from the sector, what we've been hearing loudly is affordability is an issue, and that's a key issue for parents, obviously. But the sector are screaming out that we need to build capacity. And in some instances, providers have the physical space, it's there, they don't need extensions, they don't need capital, the space is there, but they don't have the staff to actually staff the room, open it, and that's a particular issue for babies in infant rooms, and many of them, even in my own county, have actually closed. So we need to build capacity, and that is just as important as the affordability measure, and that's why we've put the equal emphasis more or less on both in our policy. It's not just about affordability, but it's about building that capacity, and we're doing this with the sector, absolutely.
And do you think that that raise is enough to bring people in, or at least retain people in the sector? Because obviously a lot of creche workers leave because the salaries aren't high enough.
Well, SIP2 are advocating for €1.50 per hour, and they're looking for a 10% increase for others grades within that. Managers, we're giving the 150 as an initial increase for all grades. I think that's really important. And then obviously the Joint Labour Committee is there, they decide on pay increases, but the last one was 65 cent. So I feel giving that 150 initially, they may go then and do their work and bring that beyond, but this is a first initial increase to make sure that the minimum floor is 15.15. And I think if we can show that we're serious in relation to paying them properly and paying them as they deserve, we will retain them in the sector. But we need to give that confidence to the sector in the first instance that isn't there right now. So if you know you're going to get increases and you can plan for that, it gives you a level of security that will mean you may remain in the sector rather than leaving it.
So it's a start.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people, as you probably know, who work in this sector, they're highly trained, highly qualified professionals, and they've felt for the longest time that they're treated like glorified babysitters, quote unquote. I mean, these are professionals in their field. We entrust them with our most precious thing, our children. And we need to now start creating those pathways and opportunities for negotiation around wages, which they need to be organised to do. And then there are other outstanding issues that will require work in the medium term. So, for example, the childcare workers signing on for the summer, as you probably know, many of them do, that needs to be addressed. So as part of a wider advancement in this area, we're very conscious of those issues. But the plan today, this is a really, really significant step forward in terms of childcare provision, the incorporation of childminders, and the state really stepping up and looking out for parents and having their back, and for our children. But of course, it's part of the story. There will be outstanding issues, and having seen the activism of the workforce, which is mainly women, not exclusively, but mainly, I think they're highly organised, highly motivated. They need this initial cash injection. It's as much a matter of respect and recognition as it is the wage levels. But if we're not talking about this, if we're not serious about this, if we're not serious about creating viable career paths, make no mistake, people will vote with their feet, they will leave, and then we will have really an ever-deepening crisis in this area.
Claire, if we're going as low as €10 a day, what is the theory behind, the thinking behind that? Why not make it completely free? And also, if you say that a Sinn Féin government will bridge the gap between €10 and whatever the child care facility is charging, does that not essentially give those facilities an open check to charge as much as they like, and they know that the government will make up the rest? And Mary, can I ask you about the government's move? Both Roger O'Gorman and the Taoiseach seem to be indicating in recent days they want to see more state involvement and state provision of childcare and early years learning. Would that be something that Sinn Féin would do as well, government?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. So firstly, just on the €10 a day, it is something, it's $10 actually in Canada, and we had looked at that model. There are other various models as well in relation to caps, but we've settled on €10. As a party, we've long advocated for a public model. I feel like this is a step in the right direction. A public model has never been looked at in relation to the Irish perspective. It would take a lot of work. It's work we want to do, but parents can't wait for a public model. I heard the Taoiseach speaking this morning about 100 days into the next government, if they're in it, having a roadmap. But I mean, parents are struggling to pay for childcare right now, and our plan deals with the here and now, and that's what parents need. In relation to the gap, tell me your other question again, sorry.
Well, just the gap between €10 whatever childcare.
Oh yes, sorry. Yeah. So it's based on the current fees. So a number of providers now have opened their books. They will be allowed in some instance to increase, but only by 33.30. So we have the contingency fund there. That's really important. But it won't be a case of you can charge whatever you want. The fees are stalled. They can't move. Some will move once they've opened their books to that 33.30, and we have that in mind. But there won't be any fees increasing. And those that sign up and come into the scheme under the NCS in what we're advocating for, they will have to hold their fees as they are.
But what about those that are now currently outside core funding because they say core funding is not enough, and so they're coming out of core funding to charge more to parents?
Yeah, well, we know that about 94% are in. For those that aren't in, that is why we want to review core funding. Like, there's clearly issues in relation to core funding. But then again, having said that, and frankly speaking, there are some providers I've spoken to who aren't in core funding because they don't want to be in a partnership with government. And that's their logic and that's their reason, and that's fair enough and that's their own prerogative. But this is about children, and it's about ensuring that parents have access to childcare that is affordable and accessible. The vast majority are signed up to core funding. A greater majority are signed up to the subsidy, which is what we're talking about in relation to the €10 a day. It's through the subsidy, it's not through core funding.
Okay, so as Claire has said, the evidence is there around the value of early years education, developmentally for children, socially. It can be one of society's great equalisers, actually, in terms of future performance and future development through the primary school experience and beyond that. So we come at this, and we all have to come at this with an eye to equality. So affordability, access, and then equality, because each child has to be given their fair and equal chance. So it's not a new thing for anyone, I think, in Irish political life to talk about a public system for childcare. But I do have to say this, the current government and Taoiseach has had many years to make that a reality, to take the kind of steps that we're describing today, and they've chosen not to. And instead, it seems on the brow of an election, they are running with the soundbite rather than a clearly thought out proposal or plan or a clear-cut commitment to parents in the here and now. This is such an important sector for families and for children. There will always be work to be done in this area to make it better, to aim for excellence, to aim for quality. We know that. So the review of core funding is a case in point. We don't have access to the type of data that we would need to make judgments and definitive conclusions on that. What we absolutely know is that parents can't wait. So it's not good enough for government now, to look into their heart at the 11th hour and to offer up a soundbite and to say to parents, mañana, mañana, mañana. That does not work. We're making a clear proposal. It's costed, it's concrete, and it will represent a fundamental transformation for so many families in terms of affordability and access. And I think that proposal around the first 52 weeks, the first year of the child's life, that is long overdue. We have all known for a long time developmentally the value to a society and to children of having that. So we want to crack on and actually do the work and not simply offer people platitudes and a long-term plan that the government haven't put on the table.
Mary Lou, the 2020 manifesto says our vision for a decade is to deliver childcare as a public service free at point of use.
Yeah.
Is that still Sinn Féin's vision? By the end of the next term of government, would childcare be free for parents?
Well, we're starting with this proposal, €10 a day per child. Our commitment remains, yes, to this as a public good. What we have to figure out, and some of the information and data that we would need to make this up is simply not available to us as a party of opposition. But certainly that would be our ambition. It seems to me that the clear-cut and definitive way to ensure that early years and childcare is not regarded as simply a labour activation mechanism, although it's important for that, or babysitting, which it clearly is not, would be to move that policy area into the Department of Education. I think that's the correct thing to do. We would be minded to do that. And yes, clearly, to ensure that every child has their equal opportunity. The way that you get to that ultimately is free at the point of delivery. We are conscious of issues around patronage and ownership. So we're aware that you've many private providers. We're proposing a social model there, and any journey forward will have to accommodate those dynamics as well. So there's a lot of talking and consultation to be done. But in the here and now, this is our idea, and this in its own right represents a very, very significant step forward.
And am I correct that the intention would be to bring it in the first budget of the next government?
Sorry?
Is the intention to bring it in the first budget?
Yeah, yes, absolutely, to be clear. So this year, as you mentioned in your reference or manifesto from 2020, I think, where it's committed to delivering a public service within a decade. This year is what we would do over the next 5 years. This is a massive step forward. It is a huge injection by the state in relation to childcare. It provides a commitment to every parent who has a child in a formal childcare setting that from September of next year you will pay no more than €10 per day for that childcare. For those childminders registered with TUSLA, they will also charge no more than €10 a day from September next year, and then we will roll it out to all other childminders across the state, all other childminders who mind child outside of family networks. So it is a massive, massive step in relation to the state in terms of registering childminders in the first instance, a huge financial commitment, as I said, €345 million, but that's part of a wider package which is in excess of over €600 million, because there's a large contingency fund there. The contingency fund is to deal with issues that has been mentioned, which would be further pay increases after year one. The year one increase is only that. It's the 150 increase in year one. There will be further pay increases. There will also be capacity issues, and also the review in relation to core funding. So there's over €200 million set aside in relation to a contingency fund. But our guarantee here today, and we're the only party that can say this, because nobody else has a plan. Nobody else has a plan. Forget about the sound bites. Nobody else has a plan. Sinn Féin have a plan here that is costed, that is detailed, and that is deliverable next year. Our commitment is, if you have a child in a formal childcare setting, from September on, you will pay no more than €10. And we deal with all the issues around capacity, around constraints, through what was outlined by Claire, but crucially, by including childminders into this scheme, as the ESRI have pointed out, you make sure that you don't create a surge onto the formal childcare setting.
And will Sinn Féin's manifesto commit to free childcare by the end of the term of government?
The commitment in relation to the term of government, you referenced the manifesto previously, which was, I believe, over 2 terms in government, and this is
but it's by the end of the decade.
Yes, which was 10, which was
this next government brings us to 2030.
yes, but sorry.
No, we're not in it.
When we committed to that, it was 5 years ago. So that meant that
But childcare fees have been cut 50% since then.
So let me be clear. Let me be clear. The commitment here is that we will deliver €10 a day childcare to parents across the sector in terms of the formal sector and childminding. We are also, as Claire has and Mary Lou has outlined, we are committed to, this is on the record for so long, committed to a public system. And during this term in government, if we are in government, we will look at the next steps to bring this into a public service. That is very, very clear. That's consistent with what we said in terms of the manifesto. But as Claire says, people need change right now. People are paying a second mortgage in childcare fees right now. It is going to end under a Sinn Féin-led government. We will make sure that you pay no more than €10 a day. And we have a plan to do it. It is costed, and we have a time frame for it.
And just to add, it's totally irrelevant to parents today if costs have been cut by 50%. If you're spending $1,600, it was a survey published only in April, the Irish Independent published it, showing costs of up to €1,600 a month in some counties. So 50% cut is irrelevant when you're paying thousands of euro for childcare. Our proposal is €10 a day, and that's a far better proposal than the costings that are there today.
Okay, one question now.
Just for Pierce on the costings, most people hear €10 a day and yeah, that sounds great, but the next question they'll have is, well, how is it being funded? So can you just explain a bit about where that funding is coming from? €10 a week there, and where that funding is coming from? Is it an increase in income tax, or what way is that?
No, as you'll be familiar, you don't have to increase income tax to pay for this type of investment in parents in a cost of living issue, but also in terms of the future of our children. because the state is recording significant surpluses each year and projected to record significant surpluses each year. You will see in any budget that there's a budgetary package well in excess of this year, in the cases of billions, and even with the budgetary package of that nature, there are still billions of euro of surplus that the state has. So there's no need to be increasing taxes on people. Indeed, this is also crucially at the heart of it is a cost of living measure. People will be able to go from, if we get one child, go from paying €800 a month in childcare fees right down to 200 from September on if Sinn Féin leads the next government. That's the type of transformation that's required here, and there's no requirement for additional taxation to fund it.
And just on the first week of a child's life and getting to that 52 weeks of leave, what sort of income level are Sinn Féin committing to for people in that 52 weeks?
So we're bringing it in under the current parents' leave and benefit that exists. So at the moment, if you're a child and you're born into a one-parent family, the mother typically will get the 26 weeks maternity and she'll get the 9 weeks parents' leave and benefit. If you're a baby born into a two-parent family, you get the 26 weeks maternity, 2 weeks paternity, and then you will get 18 weeks of the parents' leave and benefit. That's not fair. So we are saying to get to 52 weeks, we're going to give the additional 9 to the one-parent families and that 8. And then for the two-parent families, they're going to get the 8 weeks to bring them to the 52 weeks. So it's under the current social welfare payment of parents' leave and benefit.
So there's no income limits?
No.
No income limits in relation to this scheme?
Okay, Hugh.
Yeah, can I just clarify, is it €10 per day per child? Is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Can I just ask Pierce, can I just ask Pierce as well, and Mary Lou perhaps, the government has kind of been signalling in recent days that in terms of the Apple money that will go towards sort of infrastructure, potentially including housing, these kind of things, will Sinn Féin set out very clearly, and how quickly will it set out its plan for how to spend the 13 billion?
But the first thing here is we have to get, and by the way, it's 14.4.
Yeah, 14.
Lots of billion between friends,
Indeed.
says the government. So first of all, we need to get the money, the resources. I think it tells you everything about this government and the parties of government in this state, that they went to considerable length, and by the way, considerable expense on the taxpayer to try and prevent us receiving these revenues that were legally due to the state. We got this right, by the way. We told them so from the get-go. So it's good news that this resource is available to us, and we all need to think carefully. I absolutely agree. It's a question of investment in infrastructure. We have massive infrastructural deficits. As you know, we've published a very ambitious housing plan. We recognise other infrastructural deficits, but for us, the key priority for government and for the next government has to be solving the housing crisis. So we've set out our stall. We have set out a plan that amounts to 39 billion euros of expenditure over 5 years. It's a huge resource, but that's the quantum that's necessary to meet the scale of this challenge. The government, by contrast, has worked to the wrong targets, has ignored actually the targets and the data from the experts, has proved itself to be unwise and penny pinching and pursuing exactly the wrong approach. So I can only hope that this 14.4 billion euros doesn't fall into the hands of those who didn't want it, but rather falls into the hands of those who did and who do, and who actually have an ambitious plan for housing in particular. So infrastructure is, do you want to add to that, Pierce? Infrastructure is certainly where it's at.
The question is just to help try and clarify this. So you talk about the housing plan, 39 billion over 5 years. Are you saying then that the 14 billion could be used to part fund that, and then the money that you weren't going to put into the long-term investment funds and that the government were planning to, that you would put that money in now because you've got this 14 billion?
Well, in fairness, we had accounted for the expenditure anyhow. We weren't relying on a windfall from Apple.
You accounted for it, did you not, by saying that you weren't going to put the money into the long-term funds that the government has said it will?
Yes.
So
there's a crisis.
first of all, what we said is our priority. Our priority would be housing, would be ending the housing crisis. We make no bones and no apologies about that, and that will trump in relation to putting money away for the next 20 years. Sure. So therefore, we've outlined how the resources are available to the state, have always been available to the state in relation to dealing with the housing crisis. We have the over 14 billion euro now that will come into the coffers. We will look at that in terms of how it is best used to spend, but let's be clear. Our priorities here are about, in terms of this type of money and other surpluses that we have, is a catch-up programme in terms of investment. We've been arguing with the government for years about this here. What does that mean? It means build the houses that end the housing crisis. It means build the extra capacity in our health system that starts to end the health crisis. It means build the infrastructure that we need so that we are not losing the type of competitiveness that is happening at the minute in terms of issues like key infrastructure like electricity grids, energy, and also in terms of transport. So this isn't rocket science, folks. Like this will be spent on capital investment and making sure that the proper investment is in the state. It is absolutely rich, coming from a government who fought tooth and nail to make sure that this money, they lambasted us out of this when we argued that they were going to lose this case, that they were defending the indefensible, when they were going to Europe spending over 10 million euro of taxpayers' money trying to suggest that it was somehow okay that Irish incorporated companies recorded 104 billion euro profit and paid no tax here or anywhere in the world. And look, I've heard what the government have said. It's more soundbites. They don't have a plan. Like, it's months ago.
With respect though, Pierce, like, I don't see your fully plan for the 14 billion.
We've already outlined.
That was my question, is just, will you give us a clear plan before the...
Absolutely, I'm just after answering. In the manifesto we will outline very clearly in relation to where it's going. Okay. And not only that, we will outline in our alternative budget, as we do every year, where you need to ramp up capital investment on health, on transport and on housing. When I say they haven't a plan, you heard a soundbite from the Taoiseach this morning, and that's all it was. There's nothing. The Taoiseach 6 months ago, was it? He talked about a plan for 250,000 houses. He still doesn't have a plan. There is no plan here. It is only about soundbites, and it is rich for them now talking about actually how we'll spend this money. This is where they need to be held accountable. That they spent, squandered, wasted millions and millions of taxpayers' money trying to make sure that we never got over 14 billion euro. Never have we seen such waste ever in the history of this state. Indeed, and it's not just in this state, I don't know of any finance minister anywhere in the world that tried to avoid collecting 14 billion euro tax that was lawfully due to us.
Okay, on the child plan itself, maybe it's a question for Claire. You want to include childminders, currently unregistered childminders, to make sure the subsidy extends to them as well. The elephant in the room is that a lot of those aren't registered because they don't want to declare the extra childminding income that they do as supplements to whatever their day job is. What is the incentive for those people to register if there might be an extra subsidy, but they would then immediately come into the line of sight of the revenue commissioners?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is with the national plan that's there for childminders, they are all going to have to register and they're all being brought into the scheme anyway. That's happening and it has to happen because the regulations have to be there. There are draft regulations there now at the moment. But I suppose for us, it's about finding that balance. So childminders, and I've met them, many of them will be concerned in relation to people coming into their homes, inspections, the level of red tape, all of that. So that's our job of work, to sit down with TUSLA as the regulator, to sit down with the childminders and find that balance that ensures that parents can choose childminders, can get the subsidy, but also ensure that we're not putting huge pressure, red tape and all of that on childminders themselves. But the reality is they're coming in, they have to come in, they have to be registered. They have children in their own homes, they're going into children's homes. It's really important that we get that right, but key is how we do it, how we bring them with us, and that's really, really important. But for us, it's about bringing them in and ensuring that parents can access the childcare for €10 a day. And that's good for childminders as well, because at the moment, people aren't able to choose childminders. They're going into centre base where they don't always want to, and particularly in rural areas where we would have lots and lots of childminders, but parents can't choose them because they're not getting the subsidy. So I think it's a win-win, but we have to have the conversation, find the balance, but they are going to be coming in anyway.
Okay, sorry.
Quick one for Pierce and one for yourself, Claire. Did Sinn Féin examine the cost of making childcare in the early years education sector part of the public sector and decide it was too expensive? Did they examine costings, considering the government is considering that proposal? And Claire, is increasing capacity, which is a huge issue, is the increase for educators and childcare minders the main thrust of this policy that will increase those access, or those places and access?
First of all, I don't know what government are considering. Like, are they talking about a free public model Seminar talk about affordable. What does that mean? Is it 200, 600, 800? There's no details. He's talking about an idea that he might run out or have a roadmap 100 days if he gets elected to the next government that they couldn't come up with for after 13 years in government. That's what we're talking about, so let's put it in context. No, we didn't ask for a costing in relation to a fully costed public model. What we have looked at is how do we actually make a massive leap in relation to that direction and dealing with the issues that Claire outlined. How do we increase capacity? How do we make sure that our staff are properly rewarded for the work that they do, but also therefore the knock-on effects in relation to the capacity, and also how do we make sure that the burden that is on families are reduced substantially. So we worked in parts of this with the Parliamentary Budget Office to cost the model in relation to how much it would cost in terms of formal setting and also childminders outside of the home, and they gave us costings for those elements, including what it would mean in terms of inflation and pressure of costs into the future. So it's a significant amount of money. As I said, the 345 million is the number in itself, but there's also a large contingency fund there of over 200 million euro for capacity issues, wage increases, and also the review in terms of core expenditure. And on top of that there we have an additional, as you'll see in terms of our proposals, an additional 50 million in terms of capital investment as well, in terms of new builds and social enterprise, but also moving in that direction. It is our commitment, as I've said before, in terms of having a public system, and if Sinn Féin are in government in September, people will be able to avail of €10 a day childcare, but during that term of government we will look then how do you bring it to the next step in terms of public service, and we'll produce that during that time. Thank you.
And just on capacity, obviously key to building capacity is the workforce, and that's why we have that increase there that SIPTO have looked for. That's really, really important. But it's also to commit to the early years educators that this is an initial increase and there's more to come, because we have to give that level of certainty that needs to be there. And when we retain the early years educators at decent wages and proper wages and certainty in relation to the future, we can open up the rooms that are closed. That will immediately open up capacity straight away. Childminders is key as well to opening up capacity, because it will allow parents to choose childminders and take the pressure off creches, many of which have waiting lists with hundreds and hundreds of children on, even in really rural areas. You would be surprised. And then lastly, in relation to the social enterprise model, where we can use vacant and underused buildings in rural towns, sometimes even in villages maybe, in our cities where we have vacant and underused buildings, and we can use them. We have to be innovative in relation to using the spaces we have, which is much quicker, and that is how you build capacity much quicker than planning permission, which can take God only knows how long, costs and all of that. We have to be clever in relation to using what we have, and that example in Donegal is really, really impressive, where everything's under the one roof. They share rent, they share insurance, they share electricity costs. It works really, really well, and I think that's also a step in the right direction in relation to public as well, because it's community owned and it's community based, not for profit, and that's the direction we do want to get to in relation to a public model.
Okay.